So I do recognise lots of people in the audience, and my worry is, oh, they're going to know everything that I've got to say. And I'm always learning, so in fact you'll see with this presentation there's always new things coming up with regard to balance, and we do try and introduce it into our practice. So I've got lots of slides. I teach at De Montfort University. I worked at the Balance Clinic since the late 90s. I helped set the Balance Clinic up, and some of you that have been there that long will remember Jim Cook, who we set it up with, and then unfortunately he passed away and Peter Ray came in and we went forward. But so I've been there for a long time, one of the original members, and I enjoy seeing people with balance problems because you can quite often make very, very good improvements to quality of life. Now, with groups such as this, there's almost an implication that your results aren't necessarily as good as some of my other patients. But it's all relative, and George's story as an example of that. But hopefully we can help some people in different ways, and that's what we'll be looking at today. So I've put lots of information into this talk. It is going to be available on Facebook afterwards, so you need to sort of try and take notes and things. And I'm used to teaching towards students and to doctors, and I want to try not use this pointer thing too much, because I know patient groups do not like a pointer zapping around the screen. So if I'm doing it, tell me and I'll stop doing it, because I like pointing at things. So we'll look at balance, briefly discuss anatomy and physiology. You don't have to know much about it, but those that have done rehab programs will be aware I try and make exercise really easy, because if it's easy, people can do it. And the more complex exercises are, the more challenging they are to remember to do them. And with regard to balance, it's a very complex process. So with these slides, I've tried to simplify balance so you can take some information away. But there is a lot of information, and that's why I put the comfort break in, because you will be asleep probably in about 20 minutes, especially with the lights off. So, what is balance? Well, this pile of books are balanced, aren't they? But they don't have good balance. So what about these rocks? They're in balance as well, but you don't say they've got good balance. I found this quote on the internet. Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. And for those of you that have had rehab programs with me, you'll know it's all about repetitive motion, because movement is so important. But this was quoted from 1930 by Albert Einstein. That's one of his quotes. So there'll be some slides which may not be available afterwards on Facebook, because I don't always know where I get them from. And when you come to do big presentations and they go around the world, I suddenly think, oh, where did I get that from? So balance should be automatic. It usually occurs subconsciously. Probably to most of the people in this room, it does not occur subconsciously. It's at the forefront of your mind. But if we're talking about normal balance, it occurs subconsciously. It's in the background. You don't have to think about it. But I like this picture. I use it a lot when I teach, because there might be some people who don't even like the picture, because it gives them a perception that they're almost falling sitting there. But that picture is so good, because I say balance should be automatic, but if I was sitting up there with those guys having lunch, balance would be at the absolute forefront of my mind. And I'd like to think I've got reasonably good balance, having had, for those of you who know, when I broke my ankle, having fallen over, my family would say that I haven't got good balance. But if I was up there with those guys, these are all comfortable guys having a smoke and having lunch, sitting on a girder above New York. So for them, their balance is occurring automatically. They're not worried by that. If I was sitting there with them, I would be thinking, don't lean too far forward, don't lean too far back, don't lean too far forward. So if then someone asked me what I was doing next week, where I was going on holiday, and asked me some mathematical questions, I wouldn't be able to come up with the answers, because I'd be thinking, don't lean too far forward, don't lean too far back. But if that girder was only 6 inches off the ground, out the front here now, I could stand on it on one leg and do maths, because it wouldn't be at the forefront of my mind. But as soon as a balance takes over and it becomes part of a problem, it interferes. So we take it for granted. We only notice if we've got a problem with our balance. And this is to a group that can understand that statement. So what is balance? So when I teach at university, I try to come up with a definition, and it's our ability to control our centre of gravity over our base of support in a given sensory environment. So in the textbooks you get this sort of diagram here, when you've got a centre of gravity and a base of support here. There's a child here, his base of support is quite small. There's an elderly lady here who's got a walking frame, so her base of support is much bigger, which is why people in the audience here will feel more comfortable, like with a walking frame or even a walking stick or a tripod type device, because it increases your base of support, so it makes you more stable. And then at the bottom, you've got a situation where the base of support is changing. So what happens if our centre of gravity falls outside our base of support? Well, things change, so that our centre of gravity falls within our base of support. And unfortunately, in this case, the donkey had no say in it. The centre of gravity was too far back, the mass moved, and the donkey goes up in the air. So the size of our base of support affects how difficult a task is. So if you've got a big base, it makes tasks easier. If you've got a small base, the task is more challenging. So here's a lady sitting with quite a large base on the floor. So whatever balance activity she's doing, she's quite stable. Whereas a child standing on a fence has got a very high centre of gravity and a very small base of support. So that's a much more challenging balance activity. But also, it's the environment that we're doing things in. So, and you again, this audience will recognise these things. The environment that you're interacting with will affect your balance. So we've got situations here where ground and uneven surfaces, or even walking on rocks, progressing to walking on a beach. Now, for a group of people with balance problems, this creates lots of problems, and you may have experienced it yourself, because people sometimes say to me they're going on holiday, to a beach holiday, and I usually try to warn them, be careful walking on the beach, because it will be really hard. And people don't realise that, because and this isn't a sandy beach, but walking on an uneven surface, sand or rocks, next to something that's moving, which could be the sea, is moving in your peripheral vision, in an environment of clouds that might be moving over, moving with wind, your sensory environment is completely challenging your balance. So if you've got a balance problem due to your ear, that will be a very challenging situation. Some of you might identify with that. And then there's the visual environment. Probably most of you have problem with stairs, and it's twofold. It could be something like this, where you get a pattern on the stairs, so you can't even really see the steps, where the steps are, through to having some places have stairs with nice dark lines right on the edge, but that pattern of those repetitive lines can affect your balance. So in real terms, life is a balancing act. We're always just one step from a fall. Now, I do like these photos from the building of the Empire State Building, because I look at that, and what I think is, how did they get into that position? I mean, fine, once they've got there, they've got good balance, but the actual process of getting into that position would be so hard. And how do they get down? Well, there's one easy way down, but how do they get down? Maybe they didn't. So, balance can be divided into two things. We say static balance, and here's two examples of static balance. So, a gymnast and just a person deciding to stand on something in the street, that's static. So they're not moving, they're just statically balancing. I'm statically balancing now. And dynamic balance. Here's an example of dynamic balance. Little video you can watch. You probably think I'm being horrible. Why am I showing you a picture of some ice skaters falling? Well, it's because what that video shows is even when you've got really, really good balance, which they've got, we fall. We as humans fall. We do complex tasks. That's why I've fallen. That's what I tell my family. The falls I've had are because I'm doing silly things or things too fast. But as humans, we've got a high centre of gravity, we've got a small base of support, so we are inherently unstable, so we fall. It is a normal thing for us to fall, and you probably find that strange. I'm not going to do it in this group because it's the wrong group to do this to, but when I speak at the Royal College of Surgeons like the Peter Ray and have an audience of maybe 200 ENT surgeons, or I'm speaking to a group of physios at university, I ask this question with the group. I say, put up your hand if you've fallen over in the last 12 months. I don't need to know the reason, it's either yes or no. Put your hand up if you've fallen over in the last 12 months. And do you know how many people put their hand up? 60%? So 60% of people who aren't a balanced population like we've got here, 60%, and it always works, it invariably doesn't matter what group of people. I think if we did it here, it would be higher than 60%. But in a normal population, people are falling, and that's where, when you've got a balance problem, you probably aren't aware of that. You don't realise that people fall over. You see, and there's always reasons. You might slip in the street. It could be the weather. It could be leaves. It could be a whole range of reasons why they've fallen over. Now, if you keep falling a lot of the time, that can then give you a fear of falling, or if you have any bad injuries. So let's look at those. So this is quite a complex diagram. It's the maintenance of balance, moving from sensation of balance through to the action. So this side, they're the systems: vision, joint position sense, that's your body, and your vestibular system. And on the other side of that sort of feedback, feed-forward circuit is awareness of motion in the brain, control of your eye movements, control of your postural muscles, and control of motor skills. And the thing is, all of that is happening all of the time, even while I'm talking to you. That's happening for all of you right now, but it's a little bit easier for you because you're all sitting down. The cerebellum, it integrates the information. So the information from your eyes, your ears, and your body goes up into the cerebellum, and it's a balanced computer. It coordinates the sensation of what's happening with the movement and motor control. Problems in that area, so problems with the cerebellum, create big balance problems. They're the hardest to treat. And as a physio in our balance clinic, we don't tend to get many people with cerebellar problems, partly because if I say I don't want to treat them, I don't mean that in a negative way. It's because doing vestibular exercises doesn't help a cerebellar problem normally, although Peter Ray does tend to send me anyone with a balance problem that comes into the clinic. So I do see cerebellar problems, and in fact we've had some quite good results with cerebellar problems, with multiple sclerosis, with all sorts of neurological problems that shouldn't get better with what I do, but they do seem to improve. So, but as a general rule, if you've got problems with the cerebellum, it creates a nuisance balance problem because it's much harder to treat from a physio point of view. Proprioception, joint position sense, especially in your legs, in your ankles and knees, and in ligaments and tendons, and pressure sensors. So your proprioception is your sense of motion coming from pressure sensors in your toes, in the ligaments at the back of your leg. If you're worried, that's been photoshopped. But big muscles do not mean you've got good balance. And by that, big muscles, very strong muscles, does not mean a person's got good balance. Because big muscles react to something, if that was a real picture, and because there are some people almost that muscle bound, they can't react very quickly to changes in things. So they might look really good like this, but they go off balance quite easily because they haven't got the reactions. But proprioception, a lot of physios in other clinics will be looking at proprioception. Vision. And this obviously involves what we see, movement around us when we move, and the environment that we're in. There's two sets of eye movements. There's automatic eye movements, and then there's deliberate eye movements. And especially because I know some of the patients down the front, you two especially, you may want to close your eyes for this bit because you won't like this. Not because it's in bad taste, but it's showing you that your eyes can trick you. Your eyes can give you a sense of motion that isn't real. So, so here is an example of that. I told you, you didn't believe me, did you? No. So I find that really interesting because that's an optical illusion. And if people do feel rough, just close your eyes, don't look at it. But the thing is, looking at it, wherever you look at, these little markers are here, that there and there. If you look at those, that bit stops moving and then it starts moving over here. And if you look over there, it starts moving over here. So that's an optical illusion, but it's deliberately creating a sense of motion. Now that's a nice party trick for, I'll get it off that. It's just as bad, that one probably. So your eyes can trick you if someone gives you an optical illusion. But when you've got a balance problem, you can be tricked by things that shouldn't trick you. You can get a perception of movement by someone's shirt. You can get a perception of movement by curtains. You can get a perception of movement by tiles on the floor. And they're the things that I can understand and try and make you aware of. But patients can't understand it, so therefore they can't make other people understand it if they don't understand it. I had someone the other day who was really cross because their work didn't want to understand their problem and their family didn't. But I said, they didn't understand their problem, so they couldn't give me a good reason why they were getting their symptoms. So I spent a lot of my time trying to tell them why they were getting those symptoms, because if they can understand it why, they can then tell someone else. So sensory conflict is what makes people travel sick. So and reference points. So I've put that up specifically because it looks like this is the horizon here, and in fact that's the horizon down there. So some people with balance problems can't look at that picture because it makes them feel strange. Yeah. So, yes, you chose to sit down the front. So now, from my point of view, the vestibular system is really important. We've talked about the eyes, the body. The vestibular system is really important. And I'll say I've got an area of expertise in it, but I'm always learning, and I like finding interesting material on it. So if we look at the top of someone's head, looking down, so we've sliced the top of the head, that's how your inner ears sit. That's the base of your skull, so we're looking down on top. So, and in simplified anatomy from the 1997 Encyclopedia Britannica, that's what we were looking down on top, so we're looking down that way. Sorry, I'm wiggling this on the screen. And then these are the sensors, the different sensors in a different bit. You've got, in the semicircular canals, which I call the spirit levels, you've got little hair cells that waft backwards and forwards in the fluid. And in the utricle and saccule, these bits here, you've got the same sort of hair cells with a little pile of bones sitting on top of them in a jelly, which Peter Ray often calls the crystals, because they're crystals of calcium carbonate, so they're otoconia. So, and they're the gravity sensor part of the ear, in simple terms. So you can see it's a motion sensor in 3 dimensions, and upwards, down, and backwards and forwards, and it senses gravity. That little 1 centimetre device is absolutely amazing. And this 1 centimetre device is linked. It links from your vestibular system through your brain to your eye muscles. So I've told you already you've got deliberate eye movement, so you can look at me and choose to look at the door, or look over somewhere else. That's deliberate. But you've all got something called a balance reflex, which is called the vestibular ocular reflex, the VOR. If you've seen me, I always talk about the VOR, and it's a simple reflex. When you turn your head to the right, your eyes move to the left automatically. It's a simple 3-nerve reflex. It's only a nerve from your inner ear to your vestibular nucleus, from your vestibular nucleus to your oculomotor nucleus, then to your eye muscle. 3 nerves. That's your VOR, your vestibular ocular reflex. So it's only in length, let's say ear to eye, it's only that long, 3 nerves. So that means it's fast. It's a very fast reflex. It's the second fastest reflex in the body. Who knows what the first is? Sneeze. A sneeze is the fastest reflex. Your VOR is the second fastest reflex. Now that's important because most of you, well actually this group is a group that probably does know about the VOR, because if they've seen me, I've always talked about the VOR and trying to retune it. Because when you have damage to your vestibular system, and that could be damage from a virus, it could be damage from Meniere's syndrome. I agree with George on that, disease is the wrong word. Meniere's syndrome, when it's damaged from a head injury, doesn't matter what damages it, if something upsets your VOR or damages the vestibular system, the VOR gets altered and it's wrong, and you get an abnormal VOR, and then that creates symptoms. What happens is your head movements create a misperception of movement, which means your eyes move wrong. Head movement destabilizes you, and head movements create strange head symptoms, and they cause imbalance. So the sort of things they might show, it might make you veer when you're walking. So you might be walking in a straight line and you tend to drift off to the right. And that will be because your eyes are drifting to the right as you move, and you correct a bit and correct a bit and correct a bit, but over 10 yards, you're a yard further that way than you're supposed to be. So you might hit the door frame. When you thought you were going straight through, you just hit it. People can't cross roads, because to cross roads, you need quick head movement to look for cars coming quickly. Well, if you've got an abnormal VOR, you can't do that, because if you move that quick, your eyes will be in the wrong place and you'll be completely disorientated. So then you think, oh, I can't go. And then by the time you've settled, you've got to look again because you can't judge it. And then your eyes move wrong when you move your head, and they have to catch up. And people say they often get they move their head and they get a catch-up symptom. And that's an abnormal VOR. And it's worse in the dark or on uneven ground, because it's worse when you can't use your eyes to help, or you can't use your feet to help. So it's a very important balance reflex. It's the second fastest in the body, but the most important thing about it, which is why I like it, is it's adaptable. It's retunable. It can be changed with exercise, which is why, and this is where the science behind it all, which we haven't got time to go into today, it's a reflex that with repetition and the right sort of exercise can be recalibrated. You can't fix the damage that's been done to the inner ear, but you can recalibrate the brain to reinterpret the information so that the VOR changes. And so for most people, it would be it had to be sped up a little bit, because if one side's working at this level and the other side's working at that level, the exercises in the long term need to get the brain to see them in balance. And that's what exercise can do. So balance is really the sixth sense. It's a complex integration of lots of different information, which we all take for granted until there's a problem with it. So it's usually occurring automatically. As soon as it goes from automatic to your conscious, you'll change how you move, you'll start thinking, you can't think about other things. But for those that have been tested, you'll see a lot of the testing we do within the balance clinic involves having goggles on your eyes, looking at your eyes, and that's because your ears make your eyes move. And that's what we can try and measure. So the eyes are often an indicator of the balance function, which is why when you come to the balance clinic, we do lots of tests. And years ago, we used to put electrodes on. From the probably group here that people remember that, but now we use infrared cameras. Got that there. So I said that. I'm not going to talk much more about BPPV. Did Peter Ray talk about it in his presentation, BPPV? He likes BPPV. He would have shown the video of him in the chair, and our new chair. Did he say anything about the chair? Yeah. He didn't go through with it. He didn't tell you that, did he? He didn't tell you that. He only went into one position. He did not go into the bad, horrible positions. Liz was in the chair, yes. Peter, we got a video of Peter doing it, and we didn't go all the way around. That's all I can say. So BPPV, it gives you vertigo in bed. It also gives you spinning if you look up or look down, and it's basically it's showing that gravity is affecting your inner ear. So if I say it's easy to treat, and when I say it's easy to treat, there are probably people in here who've had BPPV on and off for years, and it's a real nightmare because it's easy to treat and diagnose, but it can keep coming back, and that's the problem with it. And you can have surgery to block it, and then you can get it in the other ear and all sorts. So at that point, we're now gonna. This is a good cut-off point. So we'll have a short break, comfort break, and then we'll move on to looking at. Well, we'll be discussing your symptoms. I'll be telling you your symptoms. There'll be the sort of symptoms that you experience, and then we'll try and look at what I try and do about it.
That's brilliant. That was really, really good. Thank you, Andrew. So, and it's only the interval. So those watching on Facebook, we're going to end now for about 10 minutes,
10 minutes, yeah.
And then be ready in 10 minutes time for part 2. Thank you very much.